My name is Anna. I'm 37 years old, and for nearly 20 years I lived as if kindness was an obligation, not a choice. My family lived in a quiet suburb on the southern edge of St. Paul, Minnesota, where the houses had weathered wooden roofs and winters always overstayed their welcome. I was the eldest child. My younger brother Brian was 4 years younger, but he never really had to grow up. My father, Donald, worked as a truck driver for a frozen meat distribution company. Every day he woke up at 4:30 a.m., left before the sun rose, and came home after dark. His back ached so much that he often had to bend forward just to get out of the truck, but he never missed a shift. Not even in the harshest winter. My mother, Karen, worked part-time as a receptionist at a small health center, but her chronic migraines kept her home so frequently that her job eventually became more of a conversation filler than a real source of income. Since elementary school, I learned that staying quiet at the right time could save a dinner from turning into a battlefield. When my dad got angry because Mom forgot his pain meds, I'd pour him a glass of orange juice and ask about the weather at the loading dock. When Mom cried because she couldn't remember her online banking password, I'd sit beside her for hours, guessing every familiar combination until we finally got in. Brian was different. He had that something that made adults go soft. He could spill milk all over the freshly cleaned rug and still end up in Mom's arms. He could skip a math test because he felt anxious, and still get a new video game from Dad as a reward for trying. I always had to handle things on my own. When I had a 102-degree fever on a winter night, Mom handed me a Tylenol and said, "You're not a baby, don't make a big deal out of it." Growing up in an environment like that, I developed a special skill: keeping things from falling apart. I was the one who cleaned the kitchen after my parents argued, the one who tutored Brian when his grades dropped, the one who shoveled snow and cut grass when Dad was sore and Mom couldn't sleep. Teachers adored me because I was never late, always turned in assignments on time, and had never once been written up for breaking a rule. They called me a model student. To me, I felt like a machine programmed to obey. I started earning money when I was 16. That summer, my dad's hours were cut due to company downsizing. Mom had just come off a month-long migraine episode. No one asked me to do anything, but I walked into the local coffee shop and got a night shift. I made drinks, mopped floors after school. I still remember Mom's face when I handed her my first paycheck in a paper envelope. Her eyes sparkled, but her fingers clutched the check like she was afraid I'd take it back. "Anna, you don't have to do this," she said, her voice trembling. "I want to help," I told her, and I meant it. "Because we're family." From that moment, I never stopped. Nobody asked, but everyone quietly expected. And so, the responsibilities piled on, day by day, month by month, and I truly believed that was the only way I knew how to love. I entered senior year of high school carrying two roles: honor student, and the silent backbone of my family. After classes at West Haven High, I'd run straight to Flannery's Bakery for the evening shift, scrubbing floors, bagging loaves and scrubbing pans crusted with burned flour. Every 2 weeks, I brought home my paycheck and placed it neatly on the kitchen counter next to the mail bin. My mother never asked where it came from, but she never refused it either. Some nights, she'd whisper, "Thank you, sweetheart. God bless you," before slipping the envelope into her purse, like she was afraid she might change her mind. I chose to attend community college in Bloomington, just a 30-minute drive from home. People called it smart and practical. The truth was, I didn't dare go far. Every time I considered moving into a dorm, Mom's voice would soften. "If you're not here, who's going to take me to my eye appointment next week?" Dad would add, "Your mom's car can't handle long trips, Anna. You're better off nearby." I studied marketing and worked as a TA in microeconomics to qualify for a partial scholarship. Days were for classes. Evenings, I waitressed at an Italian restaurant. Weekends, I transcribed legal notes for a retired lawyer in town. Some months, I sent home close to $700. Just enough to keep the living room lights on, and the fridge stocked with something besides ice cubes. When Brian got into college in Madison, my parents threw a party like he'd won a full-ride scholarship, even though I'd secretly been covering most of his tuition. "He's smart like his sister," Dad said that night, raising his wine glass as if to toast someone who wasn't even in the room. I smiled and said nothing. If I spoke, it would ruin the mood. When I graduated, there was no party, no balloons, no words of congratulations. I stood outside the auditorium in my cap and gown, watching friends take pictures with their families. I texted Mom. "I'm done. I'll be home soon to make dinner." My first job was at a media agency in downtown Minneapolis. The starting salary was decent, enough to rent a small apartment if I wanted, but I didn't. My parents had just replaced the roof after an April storm, taking on more than $8,000 in debt. They said they'd pay it off gradually, but I knew it wouldn't happen unless I stepped in. So I stayed. To save money, I told my coworkers when I turned down the chance to split rent. The truth? I paid off that debt in the first 6 months of work. A few years later, I got promoted. The company gave me a small bonus. I used it to buy Mom a neck massager to help with her chronic migraines, and got Brian a new laptop because the old one can't handle my design software. I still hadn't upgraded my own phone. An iPhone SE from 2016, scratch screen, and a battery that barely lasted half a day. I never took a vacation. Not because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't imagine being gone for 7 days without someone to drive Mom to pick up her meds, or change Dad's oil, or help Brian cram for another math exam. I kept telling myself, just a little longer and things would be okay. They'd be okay. I never asked, what about me? When friends asked why I still lived at home, still single, still working like I was racing a storm, I'd joke, I'm the eldest daughter. It's my destiny to keep the house from falling apart. People laughed, but I wasn't joking. I had traded the best years of my life to patch the cracks in a house I wasn't even sure I belonged in anymore. At first, I was the golden child. Mom praised me at church, Dad bragged about me to coworkers. But over time, the praise faded. No one thanked me when I paid the electric bill. No one said, "Thanks to you." They just asked, "What day are you sending the money this month?" Gratitude had quietly morphed into expectation. Quiet, constant, and relentless. I didn't see it clearly until one August afternoon, when Mom called me in the middle of a workday. She didn't ask how I was, she didn't ask if I was busy, she simply said, "Anna, don't forget to pay the home insurance today, it was due yesterday." That sentence landed like a command in my ear. That was when I realized I was no longer the beloved daughter, I had become a profit engine, greased by silent sacrifice. I still vividly remember that evening, right after I finished an online meeting with a partner in Chicago. The marketing campaign I had led had officially crossed the $1 million revenue mark in just 6 weeks. I set down my laptop and headed to the kitchen to prepare dinner for the family, like every other day. As I opened the fridge, my mom walked in. Arms crossed, looking me up and down. "You're almost 30, Anna," she said, her voice not loud but sharp like a blade. "Are you seriously not planning to have a man in your life?" I turned around, still holding the water bottle. "I'm focusing on my career," I replied, trying to stay calm. "I haven't met anyone who feels right yet." "Or maybe you're just too busy? Who wants to commit to someone who's always working and acts like a big shot boss all the time?" I forced a smile. I was a boss. At least a team lead. And I worked like that to keep this house from being foreclosed. But my mom didn't care about that. She only wanted to know when I'd bring home a husband, like her friend's daughter, who just got engaged last weekend. That night, I didn't eat with the family. I brought my food up to my room, eating while checking my bank balance. I had just paid the gas bill, the internet, and my dad's health insurance the previous week. All in all, I had spent nearly $2,400 this month on the family, not counting groceries or supplements for my mom. A week later, at the family's Thanksgiving gathering, I tried to share about a new project I was developing. An e-commerce platform for small businesses across the Midwest. I had just been praised by the CEO in front of the whole company. But before I could finish my sentence, my mom turned to Brian and said, "Tell your sister about the internship in Denver." Brian beamed and launched into a detailed story about the very open work culture and his outings with coworkers. I stayed silent, sipping my water. No one followed up on what I had been saying. Throughout dinner, I served food, cleared plates, made tea. Brian sat with his legs crossed, telling stories, while my dad repeatedly declared, "My youngest really has drive." When I gently reminded them that I had paid for Brian's flight and 3 months of rent in Denver, no one reacted. My mom just smiled, placed her hand on Brian's shoulder and said, "That's an investment in the future?" The following month, the family decided to replace all the living room furniture. I only found out when I saw the movers carrying in a new sofa. When I asked, "Did we talk about this beforehand?" my mom simply replied, "This is your parents' house. Do we need your permission every time we change something?" I bit my lip and said nothing. Still, the payment card used was mine. The charge showed up in my bank email the next morning. Payment approved, $3,720 to Midwest Furniture and Home. At some point, my input had become an annoyance. I wasn't sure when that shift happened. But more and more, I felt pushed to the sidelines. Anytime my mom made big decisions, like replacing the roof, remodeling the kitchen, or even applying for a supplementary credit card for my dad, I only found out after everything was finalized. But when payment was due, the reminder always came to me. When I suggested installing a new water filtration system for the house, because the old one was too dirty, my mom waved it off. "It's just water, no one's dying." But a week later, when Brian mentioned reverse osmosis filters, she nodded and said, "Yeah, that's probably worth trying." I was no longer seen as capable, but rather as bossy, too intense, rigid. Once when I told my dad we should cut back on expensive dining out, he sighed. "Here you go again. It's like living with an auditor." My mom mumbled, "Having to get permission from your own kid to spend money, what a joke." I began staying quiet more often, even though I still transferred money on time. I stopped sharing about work, stopped bringing up my achievements. Everything I once thought was worth being proud of now felt like evidence of arrogance or control. One Saturday afternoon, after transferring $1,800 to cover my mom's hospital debt, I walked into the living room to see Brian playing on a brand new gaming console, the kind that costs nearly $500. My mom smiled and said, "He needs to relax with all that school pressure." I asked casually, "Where did the money come from?" and she replied without flinching, "I borrowed from your card, you make plenty anyway." I looked at her. The woman who gave birth to me, who once cradled me in her arms when I had a high fever at age 3, and didn't recognize her anymore. In her eyes, I was no longer a daughter. I was a source of income, a tool for maintaining comfort, and any emotion, need, or opinion I had was just an obstacle to the convenience they had grown accustomed to. And I began to wonder, if I disappeared, would they even notice? Or just look for a replacement wallet? I didn't mean to eavesdrop, honestly, I didn't. That Monday night, with the rain quietly drizzling outside, I came home earlier than usual after a client meeting was suddenly canceled. I entered through the back door without turning on the kitchen lights, planning to change first before making dinner. But as I set my purse down, I heard my father's voice from the living room. "Lower than usual." "She can't keep living here like this," my dad said. "It suffocates me every time I walk in. It's like having a shadow watching over us constantly." "What are you talking about?" my mom replied, sounding a bit confused. "She's our daughter, Donald. She's helped us a lot." "Helped? Think about it. How many times have we had to tiptoe around her just to avoid upsetting her?" he went on. "Every decision we make, We have to be careful not to displease our financially supportive daughter. Mom was silent for a moment, then sighed. I know. I'm tired too. It feels like living in someone else's house while pretending to be in charge. Exactly. This house belongs to her now, my dad said, followed by a dry laugh. But I'm sick of the feeling of being indebted to my own daughter. She's not staying because she loves us, she's staying to be in control. I stood frozen, behind the kitchen wall. My fingers clenched the strap of my purse so tightly I went numb. For a moment I thought I was imagining things, but every word, every sentence they said landed like a blade between my shoulders. That night, I skipped dinner. I said nothing. I just went upstairs and sat on my bed until late, staring into the darkness outside the window, feeling like I was falling into a bottomless pit. When did my love and support become a burden to the people I called family? I spent the next 3 days writing down everything I needed to say. I didn't want to react emotionally. I wanted a calm, rational conversation. If everything fell apart, at least I'd know I did my part with integrity. On Friday evening after dinner, when everyone was in the living room watching TV, I stood in front of them and said, "We need to talk." My mom looked up from her magazine. My dad muted the TV without a word. Brian pulled out his earbuds with a visibly annoyed expression. I took a deep breath. I know things have been tense around here lately, I began. And I think it's time we talked honestly about what's really going on. Here we go again, my dad muttered, crossing his arms. Still, I kept my tone steady. I've supported this family financially for nearly a decade. I've never regretted it. But lately, I don't feel respected. Whenever I express my thoughts, I'm shut down like I'm interfering. But when it comes to money, I'm always the first one you call. You chose to give money, my mom cut in. No one asked you to. You did it on your own. And now you want recognition? I looked at her. I'm not asking for praise. I just want to be treated like a family member, not a walking wallet. Oh, for heaven's sake, Anna, my dad stood up. You think this house revolves around you? We fed you, gave you shelter, and now you're lecturing us? I'm just stating the truth, I said, trying to stay calm. I heard you both on Monday. The room froze. My mom paled. My father clenched his fists. I didn't mean to overhear, I continued, voice shaking slightly. But I heard every word. And it made me think. I stayed because I wanted to take care of my family. But if my presence makes you feel suffocated, I can leave. Then leave, Brian suddenly snapped. You think you're so special, always making people feel small? You live here like you own the place. Brian, I turned to him. Who do you think paid for your tuition, your apartment? Where do you think that money came from? You did it to control everyone, not out of love. Brian sneered. You just want to feel important. You don't know how to exist without being the center. I turned back to my parents. Neither of them said a word. No one stood up for me. That's enough, my dad said coldly. You're our daughter, but you've crossed a line. If you're hurt by us telling the truth, maybe you really should find somewhere else to live. Stop torturing us with your guilt trips. I looked at them. 3 people who had once been my whole world. Every sacrifice, every deferred dream, had been for them. And now, I was just a burden in their eyes. Fine, I said, my voice quiet but firm. If that's what you want, I'll leave. Tomorrow? My mom asked, her tone indifferent. Right now, I replied, turning to head upstairs. Behind me, my father fired one last shot, like a bullet to the back. Don't come back. Don't expect us to need anything from you again. I didn't answer, I just walked. No shouting, no tears, but every step I took echoed with the sound of something quietly collapsing. I moved out of my parents' house at exactly midnight that night. No one saw me off. No one looked back. I closed the door so softly that no one knew I had vanished from their lives, just as they had wished. And for the first time, I didn't look back. I called Claire, my best friend from college, who had once told me to come live with her at least until you get your balance back. She lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in the Lake Nokomis area, just over a 10-minute drive from my office. She didn't ask much over the phone, just said, "Do you need the key or should I leave the door unlocked?" I chose to knock. When I arrived, Claire had already made hot cocoa and set up the guest bed. When she saw me dragging 2 suitcases and a document bag, she didn't ask, "What happened?" She just said one thing. "You finally chose yourself." The first week passed in a blur. I went to work like a machine. Still punctual, still turning in reports, still smiling at coworkers, but completely hollow inside. Every time I picked up my phone, I hoped for a message from Mom. Or even a cold call from Dad. But the inbox remained empty. I missed home. Not the house itself, but the idea of where I thought I belonged. I missed the clinking of silverware at dinner, the scent of the laundry detergent Mom used, even the dim yellow light in the upstairs hallway. But deep down, I knew those things were no longer mine. Maybe they never truly were. The strange thing was, while my heart felt shattered, my wallet was full. After 3 weeks of not paying utility bills, medical expenses, tuition, or house maintenance, my account was untouched. I walked into Whole Foods without checking the sale column. I booked a long overdue skin exam at a private clinic for the first time in 6 years. I ate breakfast without opening my banking app or checking which bill was due next. Claire was the first to notice the shift. One night she walked into my room while I was sitting by the window, laptop shut, warm tea in hand. "When's the last time you just sat like this?" she asked. I smiled faintly, eyes still on the distant yellow lights reflecting off the lake. "Maybe. Since I was 20? You need to talk to someone, Anna," she said gently but firmly. "You've lived for other people for so long. Now it's time to understand why you let yourself endure all of that." I agreed, partly because she was right, partly because, for the first time in my life, I felt I had the right to choose. Even in healing. I found a therapist named Dr. Helen Monroe. Her office was on the 12th floor of an old building, flooded with light and eerie calm. During our 3rd session, after I described how I'd lived, how I'd taken care of my family like it was my silent duty, she wrote 2 words on a notepad. Parentification and emotional manipulation. "Anna," she said evenly, "you were placed in the role of an adult far too early. You were never allowed to be a child. You became the pillar when you were barely learning to stand." I sat frozen, unable to breathe. "The scariest part," she continued, "is that you were praised for it. And you confused that admiration with love." Every week, I met with Dr. Monroe. I started learning how to identify boundaries, something I once mistook for selfishness. I learned to tell the difference between genuine love and calculated dependency. I wrote down what I wanted, not just what I was supposed to do. And then, my work life changed too. Maybe because I wasn't running on fumes anymore. I began making decisions with real confidence, not just to prove my worth to my family. I proposed a completely new campaign strategy to a major client, and they approved it. My department head smiled at me during our routine meeting and said, "You seem lighter these days, Anna, brighter." Maybe it was because I had finally put down a burden I thought I could never unload. I also returned to playing piano, an old love I had abandoned because I didn't have time. I signed up for weekend yoga with Claire, started reading fiction again at night instead of hunched over my laptop till midnight. I bought a vintage-style desk lamp I'd always wanted but considered extravagant. For the first time, no one asked, "Why did you buy that?" Or, "Was it really necessary?" Freedom. Not the reckless kind, but the quiet, soft kind that lets you breathe deeply without guilt. I still haven't reached out to my family, they haven't called either. And, in that silence, I finally understood something. If I truly mattered, They would have looked for me for more than a missed bill. If the love was real, it wouldn't have vanished just because I stopped paying. I used to think I was abandoned. But now I know. They never really held on to me. 3 months and 12 days after I left home, my phone rang while I was waiting in line at the coffee shop below my office building. The name on the screen made me freeze. Mom. Karen. I didn't pick up. I let it ring until it stopped. 15 minutes later, it was Dad. Donald. This time I answered. Partly out of curiosity, partly because I had already prepared for this moment. Anna, he said, his voice rushed. How have you been? I'm fine, I replied calmly. Is something wrong? He hesitated for a moment, then came straight to the point. We just wanted to ask why there wasn't a transfer this month. I nearly laughed. No apology, no we miss you, not even a how are you doing? Just 6 words that cut through every illusion. Why wasn't there a transfer? Because I don't live there anymore, I said. And because you made it very clear. Don't come back, don't send money, don't interfere. Anna? He lowered his voice, a bit awkwardly. That day, everyone was upset. Things were said in the heat of the moment. You know how that is. People lose control. I know, I said, holding the cappuccino I had just received. But the issue isn't what was said in anger. The issue is that you all genuinely wanted me gone. That's not true, he argued weakly. The house is in trouble. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage. The bank has sent warning letters. What about the money I haven't been using for the past 3 months? I asked. I remember I used to pay over $1,800 each month. Where did that go? He fell silent. I could hear a faint woman's voice in the background. My mother. Let me talk to her, she said, and then the phone was handed over. Anna, my mother said in a tone so sweet, it sounded fake. I've missed you so much. Since you left, the house has felt so empty. I thought maybe you needed time, so I didn't reach out. I took a deep breath. Did you call because you missed me, or because the house is about to be foreclosed? Her tone changed instantly. Anna, that's not fair. Your father and I didn't want to call, but circumstances forced us. We're family. You can't just watch us struggle and do nothing. I stayed quiet for a few seconds, then spoke slowly. The family you're talking about, is that the same one who told me to get out and never come back? The one who called me selfish, controlling, a leech? Even though I paid for everything? That was said in the heat of the moment, she replied, her voice rising. Everyone was tired, under pressure. You're not exactly a saint either. I've never claimed to be a saint, I said. But I was the one carrying the whole family, for nearly a decade, without asking for anything in return. And yet, you all cast me out like I was a burden. You're exaggerating, she snapped. If you don't help, we'll lose everything. Lucas is in his final year. He can't relocate now. I chuckled softly. Lucas. Of course, always the top priority, even when he's living off someone else's money. And no one says a word. Anna, you're the older sibling, you should understand. Sometimes adults need help. That's what family is for. No, I said, my voice firm. Family is about respect, not exploitation. I could hear her breathing hard on the other end. Do you really want to see the whole family go bankrupt? No, Mom, I said gently. I just don't want to keep living as if love is a financial agreement. So you won't help? She asked, nearly hissing. No, I replied. I won't send money. I won't come back. And if this family ever needs support, it better start with a sincere apology, not an unpaid bill. She stayed silent, then hung up without another word. I stood on the sidewalk, the cold wind brushing against my collar, and yet I felt completely calm. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I just saw everything more clearly than ever. To them, I wasn't a daughter. I was the one who paid the bills. When I was useful, they kept me around. When I wasn't, they called it independence. And now that I dared to live for myself, they called me heartless. But I knew the truth. I was simply doing what they never taught me, protecting myself. I didn't receive any more calls after that day. No messages, no emails, no handwritten letters. The silence stretched on so deep it felt like they had erased me from their lives. Or at least, were punishing me by pretending to. I didn't fight it, I didn't text back either. I deleted my parents' numbers, closed the old bank account I used to pay family bills, and cut off all contact. For the first time in nearly 10 years, I was living just for myself. With no strings. No invisible debts. 6 months passed faster than I expected. That March, I was promoted to strategy team lead at work. The new salary let me move out of the shared room with Claire into a one-bedroom apartment on the 9th floor of a lakeside building near Lake Harriet. It wasn't huge, but it had floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the water and a balcony that caught the morning sun. I picked out every piece of furniture, every paint color. No more wondering if Mom would like it or Brian might need the extra space. I started dating a former coworker named Nathan. The one who once told me I had the eyes of someone who's been through war but still kept her softness. We weren't in a rush. He understood I needed time to believe in a relationship that didn't come with strings. I told him straight up, I'm not taking care of anyone anymore. He laughed and said, I know how to pay for my own coffee. In June, I booked a ticket to Florence, Italy. A trip I'd dreamed of since college but never dared to take. I went alone. No rigid itinerary, no pressure to get the perfect shot. I wandered slowly through cobblestone streets, listened to church bells in the early morning, and ate pistachio gelato by the Arno River like it was a reward for all the years I forgot who I was. When I came back to Minneapolis, tanned and toting a suitcase full of Italian linen, I found a letter in my mailbox from the bank that held my parents' mortgage. Curious, I opened it. It was an official notice. The property at 1657 Morrison Drive had been foreclosed. The house I grew up in, the one I paid nearly 2 years of mortgage for, was no longer theirs. I didn't feel sad. Just empty. Not because they lost the house, but because they never once called again, not even to say we were wrong. A week later, I ran into my cousin Melanie at a business seminar downtown. She didn't beat around the bush. Heard your folks are renting a 2-bedroom near the tech college, she said, not unkindly. Lucas moved back and is doing community college. Uncle Donald's out of work. Aunt Karen's working again, but it's just part-time. I nodded. You telling me this so I'll feel guilty? No, Melanie said, meeting my eyes. I just think you finally did the right thing. We stood in silence a while. Then she added, you know, back in the day, the whole family thought you were the spoiled one. Smart, sure, but still, the girl living off her parents. After everything that happened, they finally realized you were the one carrying the whole household and no one even saw it. I didn't respond, but as I walked out of the conference hall that afternoon, I felt an odd sense of peace. Like the truth had finally found its place. I kept living my own life. I enrolled in a weekend visual arts class. I went to a craft fair in Portland with Nathan. I applied to the part-time MBA program at the University of Minnesota. For the first time, not to earn more money for the family, but to grow myself. Sometimes, when I pass by the old house, now painted a new color with different people living inside, I don't get teary anymore. I just think, I lived, I loved, I sacrificed there. But that's not home anymore. Home now is where I'm respected. I don't know if my parents ever understood. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But I know one thing for sure. If they truly loved me the way they used to say, they wouldn't have needed a financial reason to keep me around. I used to think love meant endurance. Now I know. Love, for yourself or for someone else, should never come at the cost of your own destruction. And sometimes, the greatest act of love you can offer is walking away, so both sides get the chance to grow up. Each in their own time, in their own way. Anna's story is a powerful reminder that kindness should never become an unconditional obligation just because of the word family. When familial bonds are exploited like a walking credit card, walking away isn't betrayal, it's a brave act of self-worth. In real life, if you're being drained by one-sided sacrifice, remember this. Love should never cost you your identity. You have the right to set boundaries and live a life you truly own. What do you think of Anna's choice? Was she too decisive, or did she fully deserve her new beginning? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt stories about family and life.